So the next talk is going to be about React Router. And this is crazy because this is the biggest library that's being used on top of React. And Michael Jackson is going to talk to you about it right now. Thanks.
Thanks, man. I'm going to have Ryan join me here on the stage. Ryan Florence, a lot of you, I'm sure, know. Please, thank you.
Thank you.
I just didn't feel comfortable giving this talk without him up here with me because he's been such an amazing part of this journey that we've taken together in building the router. So I'm just curious, how many people in here are actually using the router? Yeah, awesome. Awesome.
Good luck.
Good luck. Hopefully your site doesn't crash and burn while we're up here. Okay, I'm ready to go with the slides. Here we go.
What do you call a fish with no eyes?
Nice. Do you have any more of those? Because we could use.
Next time we have a flub in the tech, yeah.
All right. Okay, so React Router is there's a project up on GitHub with it. It's an open source project. First of all, I just want to tell you a little about myself. I've been doing JavaScript for a long time. I am currently the systems architect at a company called Lux Valet up in San Francisco. We're an on-demand valet service. So next time you're up there and you can't find a parking spot, check us out. I'm probably most well known for my work on the router or Mustache.js or perhaps my little web server mock that I wrote and I'm quite fond of. So I want to start all of this with a little bit of a story. And this is kind of my personal story about how I came to React and how I found it. And hopefully this resonates with a few people. So it was 13th of May last year. At the time I was working on this great big Ember app. And the situation was I had a handlebars template and then I had a component code and I was like switching back and forth between them. And I would see variables in my template, and then I would say, well, what is that variable? And then I would have to go back to the component code and see, like, oh, here's where it is derived from. Or perhaps I would have to go back into like the controller or the backing model. And so I made this tweet. One day I was just like, man, that's one of the most awkward parts about Ember is that context switch between my template and my component code. Any ideas? And Eric Bryn, who's one of the Ember core contributors, he said, what in particular is bothering you? And immediately Ryan pipes in and he goes, man, that's why I like JSX so much. And I had actually been reading some stuff on React just that morning. And so I told to Ryan, I said, yeah, that's exactly what I'm talking about. It's just so easy to read. It feels like it's so much more productive. So it's kind of funny because JSX is one of the things that turned a lot of people off to React. But for me, it was like, that's awesome, right? I really want to do that in my code. Eric, however, was not amused. He says, I disagree, but to each their own. And then I feel like he kind of took a little stab, and he goes, do you like old school PHP and Rails too? And Ryan goes, no, I prefer my car. What are you even talking about? and I love that.
I forgot about that.
I was like, right then I was like, Ryan and I are going to be good friends. I could tell. It was funny because, I was sort of coming onto this thing kind of, I feel like at the exact same time that he was. Same day, James, who was just up here on the stage, published a blog post called Removing User Interface Complexity, or Why React is Awesome. If you haven't seen this library, this post, this is the post that really kind of helped me get why React was so significant, why the change was so significant, right? Instead of micromanaging changes to my DOM, I just emit DOM and say, here's what it looks like, here's what it looks like, here's what it looks like. A lot like if you've ever done game programming, and then React takes care of the diff and updating the DOM for me. And so this was one of the posts that really kind of made it click. So all this stuff was like coming together at the same time. And I was like, man, React is just totally awesome for building user interfaces. This is great. And then I went back to my Ember app, and I was like, there's something still missing here, right? Because like React is great, but it does user interfaces. And it says that right on the tin. And I love that it does that. That's what it's good at, right? It's a completely separate concern. Managing an entire application. How do you build an entire application? Well, React doesn't really care. All React cares about is your view layer. Excellent. But I went back to my Ember app, and I thought, well, I still kind of, I want to build a whole app in React. So how do I take it kind of to the next level and build a whole app? And this is the one thing that Ember really, really nailed. And all praise goes to the authors of the Ember router, Tom and Yehuda and Makti, and those guys have done a really great job. Last year at EmberConf in March, Tom and Yehuda Katz, Tom Dale and Yehuda Katz, they're not like married or anything.
Tom Huda Katz, Dale.
Yeah, exactly. They got up and they talked about flow. And they talked about how that was Ember's biggest strength, and it really is. You have incredible screen creation productivity when you're programming in Ember. Because in order to spin up a new screen, all you have to do is stick in a new route, and you've got a new screen now in your app. And it's all automatically syncing with the URL and everything. This is kind of what it looks like to map out your routes in Ember. And the really, really cool thing that I feel like they had, or the cool idea that they had was this idea of nesting. So, my top level, I have a post route, or they call it a resource in this case, but it makes a route. And then underneath that, I can edit the post, or I can view the comments. And by the way, underneath comments, there's another nested view called new. And if you think about the way that your UIs are structured, it's just boxes inside boxes inside boxes. And lots of times, if you were doing like a server-side app, say you were doing like a PHP or a Rails app, and you'd have like a partial, right? And you would like go and fetch that partial, and then you'd like go and fetch another partial, and you kind of end up with this mess of like, a lot of like imperative code that says basically like here's how we assemble this page, right? And Ember figured out how to model routes in a nested way, so I could declare, here's what the page looks like given a certain URL. So that was a really, really powerful thing that they nailed. They also came up with this quote in their presentation from EmberConf last year from Ryan Singer of Basecamp, where he says, flows are just as important to good interfaces as individual screens are. And this is important because what the Ember router forces you to do is it forces you to think about what my URLs look like and what my flow looks like through this application before I actually start coding a view, if that makes sense. So then, I was thinking about this. I was like, gosh, but I really want to use React. Like, so how do I reconcile the two, right? So Ryan pings me one day and he goes, check it out. It's like, I got this JSX thing, and I was like, I like JSX, but what the heck? Like, you're routing with JSX? And it still is kind of like a huge question mark for a lot of people. They're like, what? But it was cool, right? It worked, and we called it the React nested router.
It was 100 lines of code.
It was 100 lines of code. Ryan will never forgive me for turning his 100 lines of code into like 2,000. I don't know, what are we at now? Something?
I don't look.
Too big. And so that's kind of, long story short, we began working on it. We've been working on it ever since, probably the last 6 or 7 months. We're now, well over 1,000 commits. We've got, quite a few, stars and contributors. Please raise your hand if you've actually contributed code, commented on an issue, done anything, submitted a PR. Thank you. Like, seriously, thank you. Please, stand up. Thank you. That was, I think there were like 20 hands that popped up in here. This project has turned into really a community thing. And it really is pretty humbling for me to stand here and to be the one talking about it, because we've all made this thing. So I want to talk a little bit about the nesting and why that is so significant. Going back to Ember really quick, one of the things that Yehuda said that was really, really key, I think, is he said that if your routes are nested, if your user interface is nested, your routes should be nested. So what does that look like when you're modeling things in React Router? So up at the top, we've got some JSX, right? And basically what we say is we've got a route. And a route is, you can think of a route as like an entry point into your application, right? There is a URL that corresponds with that route. And when the user hits that URL, we will render your handler, which is a React component class. Okay? Well, we actually won't render it. We'll just figure out the hierarchy of components that need to be rendered, and then we'll call a callback, and you render it. That's important, right? So in this case, you can see, we've got some UI. Every route represents some UI. So we've got a logged out UI, and we've got a logged in UI. They each have kind of these child routes. The first one in the logged out UI might be the home page. And we don't actually want the home page to be at /home. We just want the home page to be at /. And so we give it an explicit path and say, OK, the home page, this route is called home, so we can refer to it as home. And we can link to home, but it renders at /. We've also got sign in and forgot routes. This might be like I forgot my password, or I'm going to sign in to the app. These are all things that we might show within the context of a logged out UI. Once I'm logged in, however, I get logged in UI that surrounds my dashboard UI, which is something that I can only see when I'm logged in, right? So down here, I've kind of used this notation, with the URLs mapping to the components and how they might be displayed. So logged out would wrap home, or logged out would wrap sign in. But logged in wraps dashboard. Now, it's important to realize, and this is an important distinction, that nested routes do not correspond to nested URLs. Okay? So React Router gives you complete freedom and control over what your URLs look like. Just because you nest a route doesn't mean you have to append another segment to the URL. In this case, I have two separate parent components. I have logged out and logged in, but they both share the root of the URL. Do you get what I'm saying? Logged out can render something at the root, and logged in can also render a path at the root URL. So we decouple the idea of nested routes and nested URL segments, which is something that, having the benefit of hindsight, we were able to do that because I was not able to do that with Ember's router. The other major thing that it gives you is URLs. Who here spends a lot of time thinking about URLs? Right? It's super, super important. In fact, when we're talking about web and mobile, Tom said earlier today, you don't really compare when it comes to performance, and he's absolutely right. You don't. But, you have a URL on the web, which is a really, really powerful thing. Tim Berners-Lee he wrote an article quite a few years ago where he said, cool URIs don't change. He said, URIs don't change. People change them, right? What we want is, and why is a URI so powerful? Why is it so awesome? My wife was just telling me the other day, she gets really, really annoyed when she can't copy a URL and paste it somewhere. And in this kind of move towards let's render everything on the client, gosh, we screwed that up big time as an industry. All of us did. I was at Twitter for a while. We screwed it up. Google screwed it up. They had hash bang weirdness. We all totally screwed it up. And we got these URLs and these broken back buttons, and nobody could use the web anymore. The URLs kind of became insignificant because they were broken everywhere. Sometimes they worked, sometimes they didn't. It's important, and we're bringing it back. It is a core piece of what a web application is made out of. And whenever you change states, whenever you change views in a React router application, the URL updates accordingly. So no matter what's going on, we're going to show you some demos of this later, so no matter what's going on, you always have a URL that you can copy, that you can paste, that you can share with somebody in an IRC channel or on an email or whatever. And we believe that that is really, really important. The other thing that the router kind of forces you to think about, and I hate using the word force, but it kind of does, just like React forces you to do some things. And hopefully you've learned that, well, that's kind of a good idea, actually. You know, I'm kind of glad it forces me to do things that way because, yeah, they thought it through. The other thing the router really forces you to do is it forces you to think about your URLs first. So they aren't an afterthought. It's not like I build a whole site and then I'm like, oh, look at my URLs. I put some thought into it. What do my URLs look like? And they really become part of my design process. So in this next piece, I want to talk a little bit about the third major feature of the router, which is transitions. And this one was a little bit tricky. We actually got quite a few cues from several other people in the React community. Andre Pop was a huge influence into our implementation of transitions. But transitions are basically the way that you control when the URL does change, what happens? Because sometimes you need to hook into that process and modify it somehow. So let's take a look at some examples. And let's see. Let's go back out to my Chrome. Goodbye, Twitter. Are we running here? Yes, we are. OK, so the code that I'm running here is not anything that you don't have access to. I'm just running the straight vanilla examples that we have in the React Router repo. This example, I feel like, is particularly powerful because it's something that every single person in this room has done. How many people in this room have made a login page before? Yeah, right. Let me ask a slightly different question, but it's related. How many people in this room have made a site where they had a deep link into the site? Maybe it was to some content, like a picture or a post or something. But you wanted the user to log in before they got to that content. But then immediately after they logged in, you wanted to take them to that content, right? You wanted to remember where they were going, so that you don't just like drop them in the home page or whatever. How many of you have done a site like that where that was a requirement, right? Because we care about it, right? And so many sites do this. You're like, oh, I want to see my friend's picture, and like click on, oh, gotta log in. You log in, and then you're like, what the heck is it? I don't. What am I looking at here? Like the home page of some site, right? So these are all transitions, right? These are all transitions between, transitioning to the login page, showing that, and then figuring out how to transition back. So let's see. So how should we do this? So just trying to figure out the best way to like illustrate this, right? So we've got let's say I want to go and visit my dashboard. This is an authenticated route, right? Can't go there unless I log in. So normally, when I log in, we want to take people to the About page. So I'll show you this. I go password 1. How many people have put the password right there next to the password field when they made a website?
I think I made this demo.
You did that. Yeah, right. Right. Ryan has done it. Yes. OK. This is legit practice. OK. So we log in, and then we're like, oh, we're at the About page, right? That's the default where you go if you weren't trying to go somewhere else, right? So say, for example, you just typed in, I don't know, facebook.com. You logged in. Where are we going to take them? I don't know. Take them to their home feed, right? OK, so then we log out. So then we actually want to go, say we copy and paste and send a link out to somebody in an email. And it's a link to, a dashboard that's behind some authentication. And so that person comes and they click on the link, and they're like, oh, I wasn't taken to the dashboard like I thought I was going to when I clicked on the link. Instead, they dropped me here on the login page. Well, OK, fine. I'll log in. And so I type in my password again. And now that then I hit login, and it remembered where I was going. So I hit login, and it takes me back to the dashboard. So this is so we're using two things here. We're using transition redirects and transition retries. Let's dive into the code and see if we can show people exactly where this is happening. So let's see. Examples, auth flow. I'm going to dive right in here. OK, so let me show you what my routes look like. Whenever you open a React router application, first thing you want to do, head to the routes. It'll give you a very clear map of all the possible URLs and how the components are nested in your views. So you look at this and you say, oh, OK, so here's the dashboard route that they tried to visit when they clicked on the dashboard link, right? Its handler is the dashboard component. Let's head on up there. Where did it go? Oh, it's down? There it is. Thank you. We're mixing in this authentication module. Let's see what that does. So it's right above it. Excellent. Ryan, thank you for putting it right above it. You were thinking about this moment when you did that. Thank you. So what we say is basically we've got this hook called will transition to. Okay? And that means the user has put in a URL. We're going to show this component. This component is part of the currently active hierarchy of components that we want to show on the page. And so we got this hook that says will transition to, meaning we're about to show you. Are you OK with that? And so we say, well, hold on just a second. Are they logged in? If they're not, let's save off that transition object. We'll just save it off somewhere on the login object here. And then we'll say transition.redirect to the login page. But notice we've still got a reference for this transition object hanging around. So then they go to the login page. And you'll also notice that, remember I was talking about URLs. So watch this play out once more. Hit dashboard. It kind of blinked really quick. Dashboard, right? The URL blinked really quick. And then it sent me back to the login page. So we're automatically managing the URL for you. You don't have to worry about it. Somebody could copy and paste this, and everything would work fine.
Also hit the back button. That's where we were before. But when you call that redirect, you're not going to get extra pieces in your history entry as well. So yeah. we don't just manage the redirect, but we manage these back buttons and the history entries as well. There's a difference between replacing the current URL, like push state and replace state, right? So we replace instead of push when you redirect. So that URL is not in the browser's history. But we've still got the transition object, right? So then when we come back and we're looking at our login view, it mixes in router.navigation. This is a mix-in that we've created that basically helps you to hook into the router from subroutes or from your components that lets you say, OK, now we want to transition over to this URL. So basically, what we do is we try and log you in. If it works, and we've got an attempted transition, remember that's the thing we saved off earlier, we say, OK, get rid of it, retry that transition. So we've got an object that knows the path that the user tried to visit before they were redirected to the login page. So just go and retry that. Whatever it is, transition is kind of opaque. Go and retry that, and that's why we end up at dashboard when we log in. So that's a good example, I think, of using transition redirect and transition retry. And these are all things that you've probably cooked up like in some way because you wanted to have a good experience, because you cared about your user, and you wanted to make it so that
they would have a great experience when they visited your site. And so you took a lot of time and worried about, okay, how do I manage the URL, and how do I send them where they were going after they log in, and things like that. Things like that the router just manages for you. I want to head back. Actually, not. I don't want to go there yet. I want to do one more demo. Let's do. Which is the one that does the. Why am I blanking on it? The one that does the. Oh, transitions. That's the one. Okay. Let's go to React Router examples. Wow, this is interesting. How does this all work? Is it? Wow. Interesting. URL's updating while I'm navigating. That's useful. Okay, so this is another really interesting example, right? Say you have, for example, say you have a form that people are filling out, and they type in some text, and you're like, and then they try and navigate away. So we got this form, and they're like, oh, hi. And they're like, I'm not going to click go. Forget this form. I'm out of here. Like, I'm going back to the dashboard. And you're like, wait. You sure? Because you entered some stuff into that form. How many people have done something like this before, right? You don't want them to lose all that work that they've done in their form, right? So it's like, let's make sure they actually want to navigate here. Notice, it's interesting, our URL is actually updated. And so, but it's updated to the destination route. But then we say, oh yeah, you're right. I don't want to navigate. I'll cancel. And the URL goes back to what it was before. So this is, again, managing these transitions. In this case, we're using the will transition from thing on the form. Let's see. So again, what I say, whenever we happen, won't scroll all the way down. There we go. So check out your routes. The route that we're seeing when we're looking at the form is the form handler. So here it is. So we've got a will transition from hook this time. Will transition from gets two things: the transition and the element that represents that rendered component in the page. So in this case, we can query the element and find out if it's user input. Like basically if it has any user input. Is there some text in the box that like the user hasn't submitted yet? Oh, there is? Okay. Show them a confirm dialog, and in this case, if they cancel, we say transition.abort. Okay. This is also transition.abort and transition.redirect is also very, very useful in a server-side routing context where you can say, just like I redirect on the client, I could actually redirect on the server as well, right? And I could say transition.abort, I don't know, you're not authorized, or transition.abort, not found, or something, right? There are all sorts of reasons why you may not want to show a page to a user, and that's essentially what you can do now on the server side, because you're saying transition to that path, and the router, some component in the hierarchy says, you're not supposed to transition to that route right now. Okay, so that's transitions. Let's hop back in here. So again, I just wanted to talk a little bit about the project and where we're going. I said before, it's really been exciting to work on this project, especially with Ryan, with so many amazing people in the community. People in this community are different than I've ever met, and it's been a pleasure. People have been installing React Router a lot, and it's interesting that I feel like the install rate corresponds very, very closely with the number of times that people actually install React. About a quarter of the people who type npm install React also type npm install React Router. And that, for us, has been just pretty unbelievable. And it's very exciting because we feel like it's taking React, like we really are standing on the shoulders of a lot of amazing people who've done a lot of amazing work. And the fact that React Router has in some way been able to drive adoption of React has been hugely rewarding, because there are a lot of people who put a lot of work into this. I could name a ton of names right now, but you all know who they are. And the fact that now we have this routing solution that kind of solves the pain of actually creating a full site with React. And the fact that that can help drive adoption of the underlying technology has really been excellent for us. So the future, what does the future of the router look like? Don't worry, we're not totally clueless. A couple of people have said, like, can't use the router because it's like got mixins and I use ES6 classes, so can't use the router. Yeah, I know, we know, it's coming, right? Like mixins are coming. They're not, or ES6 is coming. We're just not there yet, so we'll get there. 0.13 beta was released last night. I talked to Paul this morning. And he's like, you better get your act together because, yeah, I was like, oh, man, all right, fine, we'll get ES6 classes. Programmatic configuration instead of JSX configuration, we've heard you. Not everybody appreciates the ability to use JSX to view the way their routes are nested. So we're working on a way to programmatically configure your routes as well. Also, this crazy idea of subrouters that we're not actually sure what that is.
It's going to be awesome, though.
But it's going to be crazy. Yeah, you know when you're like thinking about something and you're like, there's something missing here, and it's that. But I don't really know what it looks like yet.
Really quickly, think if you've got an app, a button up at the top that has settings.
Yeah.
And you're at any other route in the app, but that button's always there. And now inside of that modal, you've got more navigation. And
yes.
Like, what do? It's all new routes, but you need to dynamically mount them wherever you exist right now. So that's something that we both really want to get in there so that you could dynamically mount a new set of routes at any existing route, and that's what subrouters would be.
Yeah.
We haven't even prototyped anything, though.
Yeah. We've just tossed around ideas, but this is kind of the future. We would welcome any and all contributors and pull requests, and thank you again to people who've been commenting on issues and things. Really quickly, we don't have a ton of time, but I think we're on a break now. Could I take like 1 or 2 questions? Is that okay, Chris? Okay, Chris says no questions. We're going to be over here afterward. Thank you very much.